This show is brought to you by PivX, private instant verified transactions. With its groundbreaking zero coin staking and masternodes, PivX is the top privacy currency. Feel free to trade some on Binance or Bittrex. And for more information, go to www.pivex.org.
Hello and welcome to the very first episode of State of the Project, and this one is all about Ember. Ember is a brand new cryptocurrency being built by some very, very smart guys, and it's based on a cross between a DAG and a blockchain using a very special connecting mechanism called merit caching. I'm here with the lead developer, a man who goes by the name of Kayaba, who has been a guest before on the Developers Corner podcast. I'll put a link to that in the description. But Kayaba, how are you, sir?
Great. I'm really happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's absolutely great to have you on. We're going to be doing this State of the Project podcast monthly. So every single month, this is mostly for the people within the Ember community, but also people outside of Ember community who are involved with other DAGs or other blockchain projects who want to take a note or keep a close eye on the things that are being developed in this project, because a lot of them are state of the art. So Ember, which is being created by Kayaba, let's get started with the updates. But before we do, I guess what we should do, Kayaba, is if you could just tell us briefly about your role within Ember.
Sure. So as you said, I'm the lead developer. So what this means is that I am responsible for saying how the project should move in the future, doing most of the work, providing community support, writing documentation for everything. Basically, my job is to get Ember made, and it's not limited to development.
Right. Okay.
And thankfully, recently, I've hired some great people onto the team who have definitely helped me with that. So
things are growing for Ember at the moment. The team is expanding, right?
Yeah, we've been looking for developers for, I think, a couple of months now. And we still are, but we've actually hired some people to help in the Discord server with people just getting along and people finding the links they need and getting support. And then the community has been great so far. Multiple people have, for instance, signed up to host Ember nodes for testing.
Yes. Okay, well, as you've said about testing, let's start with that. As far as I'm aware, is that Testnet 1.0 has been successful. Thinking about moving on to a Testnet 2.0. So could you explain to us a little bit about the process that you're going through with the Testnets and exactly what you was expecting to find and what you did find?
Well, I want to be clear and say this was meant to be a developer testnet. So that means that it is public, but we're not giving out binaries. If you want to get in, you have to compile your own node. It's a bit of a test because this is still very early software, and I didn't want to be plagued with supports about how do I get it, how do I sell my Ember on an exchange? Some people not realizing what's going on. So this was the developer testnet 1.0. It was the very first network that we kind of set up. And it did reach consensus. It did verify some transactions, and I'm really proud of it. And my purpose was just making sure that the nodes were going to randomly crash every 5 minutes. My purpose was to make sure that they would all stay on the same blockchain and to see if they actually did handle transactions. Within a few days, we did note a few problems. The blockchain's difficulty was a bit off, and it was taking tens of minutes to hours to mine a block when it's supposed to be one every 10 minutes. And if you disconnected and then reconnected, you weren't syncing all the data. We only synced data that had been placed on the blockchain and entries on the DAG that were confirmed on the blockchain. But this meant that miners weren't mining the elements because they didn't get them when they connected again, which means they never became confirmed. Sorry if I kind of butchered that explanation.
No, that's mostly gone over my head, but the parts that I did understand, that does sound correct.
We're not syncing the entire database. We're only syncing the parts of it that are already locked in. But since we only sync what's locked in, we can't lock in the parts that aren't.
Right. With Ember, you spoke before about the merit caching system. Now, with regards to a testnet, would you be able to test out merit caching, or was that not able, or you're not quite able to do that yet?
That's actually what the testnet was. The testnet was running an implementation of the merit caching consensus mechanism. People mined a blockchain to earn merit, and then they used that to vote on transactions, and their votes were broadcasted and instantly valid. And then they were mined back on for payouts, and that did actually work.
That's very interesting, because that was actually what I wanted to find out, was the merit caching system, which you devised yourself. You've now got it to testnet, albeit a developer's testnet, so people have to compile it themselves. But moving forward to testnet 2.0, which you've called it, what would you be testing on that testnet? Like what other things would you be testing? And also, will you then be giving out binaries so that more people can join the testing process?
It will still be a developer testnet, and it will probably be that way until either New Year's or January. Our focus with the developer testnet 2.0 is going to be a few things, from resolving these quote-unquote lifetime issues where things were created but then died before they could be locked in. We're going to be working on implementing the Satoshi consensus, where the longest chain is the valid chain, because right now we don't handle chain forks. So that's another focus of ours. We're going to try to get the RPC up to a point where if you wanted to, you could build an exchange, so we can start having the exchanges we've been in contact with work on Ember libraries and have Ember ready. So there's quite a few things, but it's still going to be a developer testnet.
Okay, you mentioned something very interesting to me there, and that's exchanges. With Ember being such new and such different technology, do you envision exchanges having a hard time implementing Ember or integrating with it?
I think any competent exchange, which has already listed, say, Bitcoin and Ethereum, know how to handle, quote unquote, multiple types of coins. I mean, if you handle Bitcoin and then if you want to add Doge, it's the same exact process. But if you want to add Bitcoin and Ethereum, it's a brand new process. So as long as they have, say, at least those two in their quality exchange, I'd be confident that they'd be able to launch Ember and do it safely. That said, the issue is convincing them to do it. We're a brand new coin. We don't have a huge ICO. We don't have the largest community to convince them with yet. So the question is, how do we convince them that it's going to be profitable for them to list us?
Yeah, that does seem to be a problem that a lot of new projects have. Have you got any ideas on how you're going to cross that bridge?
We've been talking to a lot of exchanges, from the big side to the small side, some where they could list Ember and it wouldn't make a dent on their finances, and some where it would, but they're small enough where the amount they would charge us wouldn't be 10 Bitcoin, but a much more reasonable fee, which we could likely pay.
Yeah.
And then some of these exchanges have people on them that just believe in Ember. So because of that, they're much more likely to give us a lower price or say, we'll handle the listing for free.
One of the things I really like about Ember is the transparency. So one thing I did want to speak to you about today, and it would probably be a very good time to speak about it, being that it's our first of these update podcasts, is the to-do list. Now, in the to-do list, I'll put the link in the description, but I'm scrolling through it and there's a loads of things. I would say it's like a roadmap, but a very, very technical roadmap over the short term. So there are loads of things in here that you want to be able to do: verify BLS public keys, resolve merit forks, add node karma. There are just loads and loads of things on here. This sort of way of working, do you find it helpful or useful? Why did you decide to go with this way of producing something that's not quite a roadmap, but is a roadmap for the technical minded?
I think the biggest comparison here would be Trello. Have you used Trello?
Yes.
Every time I use it, I get too focused on how things are sorted and what do I do with the dead elements. And since when you move an item to complete, it remains there, part of me wonders, like, is that item big enough to remain, or am I just filling up space? And I get OCD about it. So I feel like I spend too much time managing it than functioning with it. So with this to do, it's a document on the Ember repo, which means anyone can access it. You don't need to be granted permissions. You don't have to go to a second site. And every time I'll make a comment, I'll just cross something out. I might add something. I might move something around. It's a very loose document. And yes, there is the Git history, which means I could recover old versions, but there's no concern about old items taking up space. So it's just a very loose format that just happens to work for me. And I've kept it so far because the community hasn't asked for any reason and because it doesn't require a second site.
Yeah, well, I'm actually, full disclosure, I'm actually a member of the Ember community, and I love this sort of transparency. I think it's awesome that you, as a development team, you're working in this way so everybody can freely just pop in at any time and have a look. And as I said, the link will be in the description. So anybody listening to this, they can have a look at exactly what it is that you plan to do over the near term. This to-do list, I know it's a very difficult question and developers hate answering it, but have you got a rough kind of time scale? Like what sort of distance time-wise would something need to be achievable in to make it into this to-do list? This podcast has been brought to you by Rhubarb Media. Rhubarb Media are the branding specialists behind successful crypto projects such as PivX, Vendible, and Libertaria. The Rhubarb style is both loved and respected the world over. So if you want your project to appeal to techies and everyday users alike, give Rhubarb Media a try. You cannot possibly be disappointed. Link is in the description.
To be honest, the to-do list isn't represented by the next X months. It's represented by the next step.
Okay.
So there's a lot of things, and some of these could arguably be considered bugs. So when we work with the Mainnet blockchain, we use a system called BLS. It's a cryptography system, and it's akin to SCCP 256K1 or ED 25519. It offers speed-ups with the work we do. Verify BLS public keys just means that currently we do not, because the library we're using just doesn't offer a method to do that. So it's arguably a bug that we're not doing that. So the next step on making that safer is to verify them. You mentioned node karma. Once we successfully connect to a node, we'll stay connected to it until it crashes. So what happens if that node's trying to spam us or DDoS it? That's what node karma is. The next step to making sure nodes behave responsibly, node karma.
Yeah. Okay, so once you've gotten these things done, would you say, I don't know, maybe this is like all this to-do list will take you up to Ember 0.7, something like that, and then so on and so forth. You'd add more things to the to-do list, and it would take you up into higher numbers within the iterations of the actual Ember project itself.
So, of course, yes, as you said, the to-do list will never be done. I do think this would get us very close to 1.0, which would be the mainnet launch. The only reason I say it wouldn't is because if we look at, say, at the very bottom of the first section, which is labeled core, it just says database.
Yes.
I haven't done much work with our database code so far. It's currently storing everything in RAM. And because of that, I don't have specific items planned yet. I just have the one word of database in my to-do.
Database could end up expanding out to be bigger than features or improvements. There could be quite a lot that goes into database.
Yeah. So, of course, you can say, well, database means the entire database. So when you have database done, you'll have the mainnet ready. But it also means that I can get a prototype up, and then there's going to be 20 more to-do items.
Okay. I hear you. That makes sense. I'm going to link up, because what generally happens is you have these updates to the to-do list. People who are, if you're not already in the Ember Discord, you definitely should join it. There's a development channel there, which is linked directly to the GitHub. And it seems to me every single day there's a new commit that comes through. Sometimes they're just things like updates to the to-do list. Some of them may be small changes, but it does seem like generally every day or every other day there are commits being made. You're working at a real tremendous pace, but there was a few in particular that I saw over the last week or so, which I wanted to get more detail about these particular commits. So I'm going to ask you about them basically. The first one was literally 2 weeks ago, and it was to add a BLS wallet generator. I'm very interested in BLS. So could you explain to us exactly what this would do?
So when we were launching the developer testnet 1.0, you needed to create a wallet in order to interact with the network. This used the ED 25519 system. But if you want to mine, if you want to be a miner and all that, you have to use BLS. We have two different key systems because they're each for their own thing. And we use both of them to get the best of both worlds. So this means all miners needed to create a BLS wallet. And we had an existing way to create ED25519 wallets, and that was perfectly fine. But we did not have an existing way to create BLS wallets, and it was a real pain to do so. So I wrote up a quick sample that would make it easier for anyone who wanted to participate in the developer testnet to create one. They just have to run a single command, and it will create a wallet for them to use. Just outputs their private key and public key.
Okay, yeah. The commit itself, yeah, it does look quite simple. You've got it done in 15 lines of code, which is typical Kayaba efficiency. The second one I wanted to move on to was to fix converting a mint to JSON. You mentioned something a little bit similar to this earlier, but if you could explain to us exactly what this commit was about.
I believe the one you're talking about was a bug fix, where when we were converting them into JSON, we were using its raw binary and not the hexadecimal version of it. So it just was breaking some JSON parsers because it wasn't valid JSON, or because it would randomly have a quotation mark in it, because raw binary can be the quotation mark symbol, of course. It's all part of the system that it's part of, though, is the JSON retrieval of lattice entries. Of course, if you want to run an exchange, or even just for me to get more info on what's going on, I need to be able to ask what's going on at this index or at this hatch. So there's a JSON method, and it will take any requests. It will find out what type of entry is there, and then it will auto-format it accordingly and with all the proper fields, and give me all the data on the entry that it has.
I find this quite interesting that you've picked up on this earlier. I'm not sure if you remember or if you're aware of it. There was a problem with ZeroCoin some months ago where they, with their setup, they weren't interpreting their own code properly. So it was coming out as a string, and they were taking it as a integer when it was actually a hexadecimal, or so one way or the other. So this will be something very similar, but you've managed to catch it at an early stage rather than it going into mainnet and then causing problems.
Well, to be fair, this was just on the JSON end of things. This wasn't in the code base. So this would just report on how it's this would just tell the user the wrong thing, not be the wrong thing.
Okay.
That said, we do have a lot of protections to make sure that we don't mess up. We do work with both. We generally work with binary strings on the back end, just raw data. But of course, the user is more likely to use hexadecimal or addresses or so on. So when we write our constructors for private keys, public keys, and so on, we check the length of the data. And if it's a certain length, we treat it as binary. And if it's another, we treat it as hex. And if it's neither, we throw an error. So this means that we don't actually have to think about if it's binary or hex, because it will just handle it for us.
Excellent. Okay, Kayaba. Right, I'm acutely aware of time. So I just wanted to ask you, are you pleased with the progress that Ember has been making over the last month or so?
Yeah, definitely. We got a lot of new community members. We had our first testnet. We closed down our first testnet because we got all the data we needed. So it was definitely a success. We've done a lot of work on the code. We've fixed some bugs that have been there for a while. So yeah, I'm definitely proud of it.
Excellent. And what sorts of, I know we've got the to-do list, but what sorts of things have you got planned for the next month or so? What sorts of things can people look forward to seeing getting added to the GitHub code?
In the next month or so, my plan is to get ready to do another developer testnet, the 2.0, and get ready for the first public testnet, which I'm likely going to launch in early January. So really, You can see a lot of work, both on the usability side of things and on the quote-unquote core side of things. There's going to be a good balance there as we prepare to ship binaries out to users.
Okay, do you have a rough idea for when you'll see Ember moving towards mainnet? Just a rough idea, not a deadline, but just which quarter of next year, for example, can you see Ember moving into mainnet?
It's going to likely be around Q1 or Q2. We're talking maybe February or through April. That's sort of 3 months. doesn't really line up with an exact order.
No, it doesn't. But that's good, because what I want to do is every month when we have these podcasts, I want to ask you, do you think we're still on course for? So if we say end of Q2, worst case scenario. So next month when we do our update, I'll say, do you feel like we're still on course for Q2? But if you can see things are starting to stretch and you can see that there's more that you want to get in and there's more code that you want to get done, or the databases that we spoke about before really expands, you may say, oh, perhaps we may move it to Q3. And just so that we can really keep people updated onto how close we are to finishing and how close we are to keeping it on schedule. Do you think that would be a good idea for us?
I will definitely make sure that honest and transparent about it. So if you ask, I will definitely answer with the truth. That said, I truly do think the end of Q2, as in 6 months from now, is going to be the mainnet. I don't think we're going to have to take 7 to 9 months to get it up. The only concerns I would have is with the audits we want to get done. Because it's fine if we're alive for a month without being on an exchange, but I really want to make sure this is audited. I question launching a coin if it's not properly secure. This isn't just internet tokens for a video game. No, this is real money. All of cryptocurrency is.
All of cryptocurrency claims to be that. Some of it is just internet tokens.
They connect.
That's true. Do you have any idea of who you will get in for an audit?
We've been looking over a few firms. It's kind of tricky to answer because, one, we use NIM as a programming language. We're a bit off the standard there, which we discussed in our previous podcast.
Yep.
So that's one difficulty. And then another is just how new this tech is. We're not just auditing a comet that forked Bitcoin. No, it's a code base. And of course, a lot of the generic institutions of business would go to won't handle cryptocurrency. So we've been looking over some Ethereum firms. Just because they know cryptocurrency. Of course, we're being honest. We're not saying, hey, you only do Solidity contracts, come audit this, which isn't. We're also looking at the firm Zcash contacted. And I'm looking at some of the top developers in the NIM community. I haven't reached out, just so we're clear, but I'm also considering that because even if they can't answer if the cryptocurrency is secure, they can verify that my NIM code is.
Yeah. Okay, excellent. Just to let anybody know that if there is anybody who does have an idea of a company or an individual who can do an audit to a good standard and with a good reputation, that they can come forward, where would be the best place to contact you?
My email is definitely a good option, lukep@embercrypto.io. And then, of course, there's our Discord server, likely online 12 to 16 hours a day. If anyone just wants to ping at me, I'll respond pretty quickly if I'm awake.
Excellent. Kayaba, thank you so much for joining us on this first update state of the project for Ember. It's been great speaking to you as usual. And for anybody who is looking into Ember seriously, wants to contribute, any developers who want to get involved with the testnet and really get in on this thing at the ground level, because it is such early days for such a promising project, just jump into the Discord and look out for us on our next podcast, which should come around the start of the new year. And we're aiming for, now you've heard it first, mainnet release around the end of May, I believe you said. No pressure.
End of April, yeah.
Okay, fair enough. If you want to move it forward, that's fine. We'll say end of April. Okay, Kaya, but go ahead.
I did say February through April, so
okay.
Gonna try to keep my word there.
Okay, right. Kayaba, thank you so much for coming on State of the Project, and I'll speak to you at the start of 2019.
Very happy to be here.
Cheers.
Cheers.
This show is brought to you by PivX Private Instant Verified Transactions. With its groundbreaking zero-coin staking and masternodes, PivX is the top privacy currency. Feel free to trade some on Binance or Bittrex. And for more information, go to www.pivx.org.